Hello, folks, and welcome to the first episode of our new Hidden Door live shows. I'm Hazel Johnson, one of the Hidden Door team, and I am delighted to be here this evening. We have a fantastic show for you.
Hi, and I'm David Martin. I'm also a Hidden Door person, and we will be your co-hosts tonight, both of us. We'll be beaming in from opposite sides of the universe, or probably more like Edinburgh, really, and we'll be popping in and out of the live show at various points, kind of guiding you along. Hazel, do you want to tell us a little bit about what this is all about?
Absolutely. So, for those of you watching this evening that don't already know us, Hidden Door is an Edinburgh-based volunteer-run arts charity, and usually we hold annual arts festivals in unique and interesting, empty and often derelict urban spaces. So to both literally and figuratively open up space for the arts in the city. So obviously things are a little different at the moment. So like everybody, we've had to adapt. And these online shows are how Hidden Door can play a part in helping to keep the arts alive and connected. As a community, we remain physically distant, so that's even more important than ever. So Hidden Door Live is our second live show series, following on from our pilot shows from a couple of months back, where we had a great time testing the format and seeing what worked and what didn't work. Thanks to support from Creative Scotland, these new shows have been able to build on that. And they'll take place fortnightly with a fresh artist curator for each show.
Yeah, so the live shows are actually the culmination of a 2-week project curated by an artist or a musician. So this first Hidden Door live project, called Iterations, actually started 2 weeks ago. It's been put together by Edinburgh-based musician, composer, and sound artist Dave House, also known as the Reverse Engineer. He makes music and installations from algorithms, field recordings, and synthesis, which I can't even say. And he regularly collaborates with people from all sorts of different kind of creative fields, including dancers and visual artists and all sorts. Normally, he'd be performing at gigs and festivals of all different shapes and sizes around the country, but he's not doing that right now. So we have him here. So let's get him on and he can tell us all about this project.
Hello.
Welcome, Dave.
Thank you very much.
You're the artist curator for this show. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means and what's involved?
Yeah, so I was asked to put together a project that spanned the fortnight and ends up in this live show. So it was a case of coming up with an idea that we thought could work, and thinking of a bunch of people who'd be good to get involved, and kind of, running things a little bit along the way.
So can you tell us a little bit about, can you summarize the project for us? Tell us kind of what we can actually expect to see and kind of hear tonight.
Yeah, so there's 6 artists involved, including myself. And the idea is that each artist makes a piece of work in response to a sort of overall theme of how COVID and lockdown has affected their creative output and their mental health, and their creativity in general, really. And then they pass that piece on to the next artist, who kind of responds to that piece and the overall theme, and so on down the chain. And each artist, the other stipulation was each artist kind of tangibly samples something from the previous piece of work to keep. The idea was to sort of keep this seed going throughout, passed from artist to artist. The thinking behind that was, we're all stuck in our homes or studios if we're lucky, when usually we'd be out working together. So this is a way of doing a sort of remote collaboration, I suppose.
Well, that covers my question as to how you thought up the project. So like a supportive relay, essentially.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And then also, I remember we talked, myself and David talked about whether, people were fed up with hearing about the mental health hit from COVID. And we both decided actually it's mentioned a lot, but it's not necessarily talked about. So I think there's always room for that conversation. That's quite a big part of it as well.
Yeah, good. Definitely.
I remember meeting up with you in a wee cafe at the top of Leith Walk and asking you if you wanted to do the project, and you kind of mentioned this sort of idea, and it all sounded really exciting at the time. And I was thinking, I wonder who you're going to involve, who you're going to ask. So how did you decide who to invite?
Well, I wanted to have a sort of broad range of creatives, so it wouldn't all be one kind of response, and everyone involved I've worked with before, and they're all hugely talented people who I love working with, and I think everyone's local as well, so it's nice to sort of use my network, my kind of local scene, as it were. Yeah.
And dare I ask, were there any surprises along the way? Did it turn out as you imagined, or?
Yes and no. Yeah, there were certainly surprises, but there were also, I think everyone sort of responded very personally. There's bits of everybody's character in the pieces they produce, which I guess you'd expect. But then, some people's responses definitely surprised me. Some of the themes touched on, and the honesty in the work and stuff like that.
Great. So the idea is now that we're going to actually speak to each of the individual artists who made up this project with you, and we're going to check out what they came up with. And then once we've been through everybody, ending with yourself, Dave, we're going to get everyone back together at the end. So we'll see you then, and also you too, Hazel. So I'll take it from here.
Over to you.
Okay, so this is where all our great planning all just suddenly went to waste, because The very first artist that Dave House asked to start the whole process off is the incredible Esther Swift, who's actually been on Hidden Door live show before. You may remember her if you were tuned into that show. She's the virtuoso, amazing harp player and composer. And she was the first person that Dave asked to kick off the whole sequence. But Esther's sadly just been hit by a horrible virus. We do not know what strain of virus this is, but she's not very well tonight, so she is not able to join us. However, what we thought we would do in order to start the whole thing off is we thought we would play you some of the clips that Esther made. Part of the idea of Dave's project was that as people thought of their work and thought of what they were going to make, they would document it a bit and put it on social media. So we had little videos popping up on Instagram all the way through this process. And the idea is that it's supposed to help us kind of get a little bit inside the creative process of these different people and sort of see how different people have a very different kind of creative process. So because Esther's not able to join us tonight, and we've actually just knocked together very quickly a little video that just documents a little bit of Esther's creative thinking. And then what we'll do is we'll cut then to a separate little video, which is actually just the audio, the piece of music that Esther composed at the end of her process. So you'll hear that after the little clips of Esther talking. Okay, so let's have a look and see if we can get that video to work.
Today I'm going to be exploring my emotional response to the lockdown, to COVID-19, to all of my work being taken online or disappearing. I've got my puck and pad, so I'm going to be first of all writing down some words that mean something to me. I've been for a swim this morning because it's sort of keeping me sane at the moment, exercise in general. And there's the beast, prepped beside my towel. And this room is where I've spent my entire last 6 months. I'm going to write something about that, about the push and pull of time, of waiting around, and what that does to your anxiety and your flow, because I have spent a lot of my day now just sitting watching this thing trying to upload, and it's massively interrupted my creative flow and how much I've wanted to sit with my instrument and sit with my creativity. I've been researching artists and music that has moved me through lockdown, and I've come to Thom Yorke of Radiohead, who's obviously a genius and a legend. And he wrote the film score for the horror film Suspiria, which I haven't watched, but it's the psychological, gory, and I'm not into that right now. But this is his song Suspirium, which feels extremely relevant for me at the moment through this time. Sort of searches the meaning of the human body and what our bodies are for, and our seeking of physical experiences. In contrast to Thom Yorke's melancholy, I thought I'd take a look at Bjork, who I've listened to a lot. During lockdown, I've actually listened to her in chronological order, and she's so inspiring in so many ways, but she has this one song called Declare Independence, which is like references feminist punk in my view, and it uses a really interesting ambiguous scale. It's like hard to tell because the actual original bass line is so distorted. It's really great, you should listen to it, but this is the scale I managed to get out of it. So it's like half major, half minor. I've been thinking about combining those really cool, interesting chords that Thom Yorke uses, where he sort of goes between the major and the minor, and the ambiguity of the Bjork scale in that punk track. Welcome.
So I'm really sorry that we couldn't have Esther play that live for us tonight. I would have really loved to have seen her kind of hammer that harp. Sound like she was really kind of playing it. Like very much in that kind of punk style that she was kind of referencing there. So we just put that together at the very last minute, but really wanted to kind of show you what Esther had come up with in just a couple of days. She composed that piece and recorded that piece of audio and handed it on to the next artist. The next artist in the chain is known as Mara the Storyteller. And I'm delighted to bring her onto the show. Mara is a narrative artist. She draws on her rich dual Kenyan and Scottish cultural heritage to create worlds that explore contemporary issues through legend, myth, and fantasy. With her own vision of the beauty, history, and aspirations of the people of African heritage, she fuses ancient and modern in an intoxicating experience where the audience takes center stage, exploring big themes such as the legacy of colonialism and slavery through myth and fantasy. Mara's performed and run workshops in over 20 countries around the world, but she's stuck here right now, like the rest of us. So we're very lucky and delighted to have her be part of this project. Let's welcome Mara onto the show.
Hey, hi everybody.
Hey, hi Mara, how you doing?
Good, very good.
Excellent. Well, I want to ask you a few questions, really, about how you kind of found the project. Firstly, what did you think of Dave's idea of being asked to respond to somebody else's work?
So I was really excited by it, actually. Dave did some sound for me for the show Blood and Gold, which was about slavery and colonialism, and I just thought it was just a really lovely idea of being able to kind of to be inspired by somebody's work, and then in quite a short space of time, there's that added pressure, which I haven't had in quite the same way recently. So I just thought it would be something challenging and also something completely different to the kind of work that I normally do, which I think is quite refreshing and therefore exciting for me. So yeah, I was very happy to be involved.
So you got sent that particular piece of music that we've just heard from Esther, and what did you think when you first gave it a listen?
I listened to it about 3 times, trying to work it out, because punk music isn't really the kind of music that I would normally listen to, and so I found and I'm not a musician, so I don't know the way the notes sort of worked. It kind of jarred in a lot of ways, but at the same time there was a lot that was being said, and I loved how the music was punctuated with these words, and the words also said quite a lot to me, which is probably why I kind of focused on the inspiration that I took from her work were based on the words that came out of it. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I'm really glad that I was second, not first.
Yeah. So yeah, that's great. So you haven't really come across that much punk harp before?
No.
Surprising. So you say you were kind of really kind of drawn to the words that Esther had put into the piece. Did that kind of focus you on any particular themes for what you were going to make?
Quite a few. I think, one of the difficulties for most people in lockdown is or certainly for me anyway, it's been this kind of quite a claustrophobic experience where suddenly you're forced to be with the same people and the same energy for extended periods of time. And if you're used to being out and, like with artists, we're collaborating, we're working with different people and ideas are just constantly flowing, whereas you're sort of, forced into this state of domesticity in a sense that is quite alien year round. So I guess that when she was talking about, sort of cutting loose and staging an intervention, those were sort of the ideas that came to mind, because I think for me that's probably been and is currently the most challenging thing about being in this kind of COVID situation. It's this sort of, it's quite an oppressive state to be in, and a feeling that your wings have been clipped quite a bit. So yeah.
I am so glad you said it. I've not heard it said better, to be honest. That so perfectly encapsulates how I feel about so much of this. It's amazing. Well, listen, I believe you're going to perform your piece then that you created. You're going to perform it for us right now, yeah?
I am, yeah. And so it's kind of just sort of looking at, lots of different ideas about relationships and society and constraints on things. So yes, I'm going to perform it.
Fantastic. I'll leave you to do that.
Okay. Cut loose. Cut loose. There was once a young woman. She loved her life. Everywhere she went, she would spread her arms out free and feel the sun on her skin. She would throw away her shoes and she would dance bare feet in the grass in the meadows with her friends. She would swim wild in the oceans. She loved her life. But one day, she saw a young man, and immediately there was something about him. She felt her heart beginning to pound, her chest felt like it was about to explode. Whenever she saw him, her skin would flush, her throat would dry, her hands would sweat. She could barely speak. She had fallen in love. And the young man had fallen with her too. Whenever he saw her, he just thought she was the most wonderful person that he had ever met, the most wonderful person in the world. And so after some time, he decided to offer her a gift. It was a pair of shoes. And these shoes, whenever anybody saw them, they just thought they were the most beautiful, most desirable shoes that they had ever seen. And the girl, well, she loved this man. And she thought that the shoes were beautiful too. And so she accepted the gift. She placed the shoes on her feet and she went off into the world. And everybody who saw those shoes, their eyes would widen. Oh, they would just think, wow, look at those shoes. And the young woman, she enjoyed the feeling of these shoes. They gave her a certain power. She was able to access places that she had never really been able to access before. She enjoyed the feeling that people gave when they saw her approaching and they would say, wow, look at those wonderful shoes. Look at those beautiful shoes. How envious they were, they told her. And so the young woman kept the shoes on. She became used to the shoes. And after some time, she almost forgot what it felt like to dance with no shoes at all. But she also noticed that although the shoes were beautiful, there was a certain rub. And the longer she kept the shoes on, the more she noticed the rub. The rub, it began to frustrate her. But the shoes were beautiful and she loved him, and so she kept the shoes on. The rub persisted. And it was only after a long time, years had passed, and one day she was out in the streets and she saw a young woman out in the fields. Her feet were bare and her arms were outstretched up into the sky, the sun's rays on the palms of her hand. And it was then that our young woman began to think that perhaps she didn't need those shoes after all. Perhaps it was time to cut loose. To cut loose.
Amateur. Wow, Mara, that was stunning. Thank you so much. I've got goosebumps. That was absolutely beautiful. Well, following hard on the heels of that amazing performance, I'd like to introduce Caoilinn Hay, otherwise known as Belle Lungs. I'm going to consult my notes here. Belle Lungs is a Scottish-Turkish multi-instrumentalist and vocalist who moved from Edinburgh to Glasgow just before lockdown after 18 months mostly spent touring across Europe. She is especially interested in sensory immersive practice and is inherently both cross-disciplinary, collaboration and community focused. Belle Lungs, welcome to the show. Hello.
Hi there.
Hi.
Hi.
Welcome. Lovely to have you here. Now, just quickly, shall I call you Bell Lungs, or would you like to be called Shaylin? What would you prefer?
Oh, just whatever you like. I don't really care. I just
How are
answer to
you?
anything.
So lockdown, just as you arrived in a new city, that must have been absolutely nuts and a bit of a shock to the system, huh?
Well, it wasn't completely new. I used to live in Glasgow before I moved to Edinburgh, but I'd been in Edinburgh for the past 5 years. So it's a city can change a lot, or any place can change a lot. So it was definitely a shock coming back, and just people's lives change, and it's really, really hard to sort of sustain relationships when you're like friendships. I mean, when you're on like the road a lot, because you don't see people and you start to slide out of their lives. And then I would come back, and Edinburgh would be my base, and I'd see some friends and then disappear again, and probably wasn't as good a friend to some people as I should have been because I wasn't there.
Oh, absence makes the heart grow fonder, I find. I'm pretty sure most of my pals are relieved when they don't see me for a while. Before we see your response to Mara's piece, just wanted to hear a little bit about your experience with the process. How did you feel about being invited by Dave to create work in response to another artist's work? And had you met Mara or her work before, or was it completely new to you?
I've never met Mara before, unfortunately, because she seems like a really great person, and I really loved the quality of her work. I had actually seen her before, because I'd seen the wonderful promotion for her theatre piece, Blood and Gold, and I just thought it was really, like, the images were stunning, and I wanted to go and see it, but of course I wasn't here, so I saw about it. And
well, that's great that the live show can bring you together.
Yeah, incredible, isn't it? But I really responded to how kind of Mara was talking about the shoes. And obviously I didn't know what aspect of Esther's work she was responding to. So there was like that tiny moment of terror that I was going to respond to the exact same element and then just kind of perpetuate that instead of perpetuating something new. So I really resonated when Mara was talking about shoes, because one of my favourite films is The Red Shoes, which is a really incredible early 20th century film about, I mean, it's based on Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tale. But this particular version is based on a ballet. And I just sort of thought any creative person or any person that has any passion for a thing that they devote their entire life to often faces these questions of putting on the shoes. And you know, there are things that you have to sacrifice for whatever it is that you do, and there's choices that we have to make, and sometimes that's very difficult. And certainly I think that in some ways a lockdown was good for a lot of freelance artists that I know, because it forced us to stop and it forced us to relax. And so many people are burned out, and there's a whole society of, well, culture within our freelance world where we can't discuss this. We're all very much individual, although we all have like some strange same employer that works us all to the ground. But then the kind of flip side is when sound starts to kind of creep back in, or society starts to open up, and you see people starting to make work, but maybe you're not ready, or you know, you're applying for opportunities and you're not getting them. And there's so many, it's very difficult because you feel like things are waking up, but you aren't. Like, where's your moment of spring?
And I like your idea of sort of things slow down, though, and to allow you a bit of space to figure out what that might be, though.
Yeah, it's very difficult to have that balance, I think. And I think that's something so many people struggle with. And
definitely.
Yeah.
And in terms of balance,
so my piece is kind of, sorry?
No, it's okay. I was just going to ask a question, but if crack on.
Oh, no, sorry, I'll just be quiet. Sorry, what were you going to say?
These are my lessons I need to learn, not to interrupt the guests. But I just wanted to ask a little bit about travel, because I think that's played a big part in a lot of your work, and certainly how you've performed. And all of a sudden not being able to travel, did you find that freeing, or was that sort of limiting in terms of your process?
I mean, I think that Mara actually explained it really well when she was talking to Dave earlier, because yes, it is really strange because you're suddenly in this domestic situation, and there was lots of skills that had to rediscover that I felt like I'd lost, because when you're traveling and touring a lot, you don't often have access to cooking facilities, so you're very much at the mercy of what you're fed or what you find to eat. And so these kind of things and these kind of routines, and you're always kind of poised like a panther ready to pounce on something, because you're always thinking about where you're going to be in like the next days, weeks, months, and everything is it's all kind of slots into place. And so it was very strange suddenly just being in one place, and having just moved, there was not this sense of home or this sense of relaxation or this safety or like this haven, because everything was different. And so I found it really, really difficult, like many people did, for so many reasons. And I was also fortunate to be with my partner, and luckily we get on mostly pretty well.
That's always handy.
So that was really fortunate. But yeah, it's strange because there's just so much energy that's being exchanged, because you're meeting all these different people, you're spending long hours on trains, because I mostly travel by train or by ferry. So you just loads of time to meet people, and just these random little encounters where someone just suddenly starts telling you some really incredible story from their life, and all of a sudden that's just gone. And that was really hard. And I also really missed charity shops, and I also really missed the sea, because I don't live near the sea now. I'm in Glasgow, and the sea is far away, and that was also just tricky to deal with.
Did any of this play a part in the work that you've produced, which we'll introduce in just a sec? But did any of that feed into your inspiration for your piece responding to Mara's work?
Absolutely, because I sort of tried to think about things that I'd found comforting during lockdown, and things that I did find comforting were sort of cooking and baking and going for walks in the parks nearby and trying to explore I moved to a part of Glasgow I never lived in before, so I was just trying to
explore, isn't it? Exploring a new part of the city.
Yeah.
I've discovered so much of Edinburgh that I didn't really know about, which is shameful,
yeah,
really.
God, I felt so jealous. I wished I'd been in Edinburgh so much during the lockdown, and just, I really missed all my friends so much.
Oh, bless you. And I'm sure Glasgow's been a fab place to be. I'm going to move us along a wee bit, if I may,
of course,
just to say thank you so much. I'm fascinated to see your piece, which should appear now as if by magic, I think.
The roads were silent, and now there are sound tracks my every move. All those steaming people seemed melancholy, and the roads were silent. Stillness, and now there is sound and movement my every move. Swapping one city with another, one road with another, and now there is sound, stillness, and now there is sound and movement my every move. Swapping one city with another, always one road with another dance together, stillness, and now there is sound and movement, and now there is sound. Swapping one city with another, one road with another, one road with another, stillness, and now there is sound and movement. Swapping one city with another, one road with another dance together, stillness, and now there is
Thank you so much, Jalen. That was amazing. I loved it. Absolute pleasure to have you on the show, and we'll see you again a little bit later on. But next up with us is Charlie Knox of Trudat Sound, and he leads the Semi-Specific Ensemble and is a DJ and Once Upon a Time party organizer. He has a monthly radio show on Subcity called Practice Good Practice, and he makes weird, and these are his own words, audio-visual installations and performances that sometimes sound like techno and sometimes sound like jazz. And according to my notes, he really misses dancing. That's you and me both, Charlie. Welcome to Hidden Door Live. Wonderful to have you on the show.
Hi there. Pleased to be here.
Hello. Hi. So where do you like to go dancing? What's your favorite dancing spot?
Well, so I live in the south side of Glasgow, and we've got, well, I mean, up until lockdown, we had a really nice community feeling here. I used to work in a bar called the Rum Shack, and so we'd go dancing there quite a lot, and I'd see a lot of friendly faces, and that's also where I put on a lot of events and shows and stuff. So that was kind of my home and my base.
Oh, but, home from home.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I do miss it. I'm sure we all do. So in this relay of artists after artists after artists, you followed on from Jaylan, and have you ever worked in this way before, responding to someone else's work, and how did you find it?
Yeah, I have, and it's kind of it's good, but it's kind of weird because obviously it's not a collaboration; it is a response, you know.
Yeah.
And like, so I know Jaylan, I'm a big fan of her work. We have, like, she's played in Semi-Specific Ensemble before, and I've spent much of this year trying to organize a recording session involving her and the rest of the group and stuff. But obviously, due to COVID, that's been kind of difficult. But it was kind of weird, like, working, like, sampling her work. And so it wasn't a dialogue, it wasn't a conversation. It was me giving her work and then given sort of free, like, just let to do whatever I want with it. And it's kind of, I don't know, it feels sort of invasive or something, because you're kind of like reappropriating someone else's voice, you know. And it's kind of, I guess with any kind of sampling, you have to be slightly mindful and sort of wary of what the source material you're using is, because it's very easy. Certainly, like, the way I worked on it is like you start just like dive right in and you're experimenting with it and you're doing all sorts of stuff with it. And then you're like, hang on a minute, this is, you know, this is someone's image, this is someone's voice, and I'm just like messing it up, you know, and playing around with it. And like, you have to kind of be wary a wee bit of what you're working with.
So a very different process to how you'd normally work. Has it thrown up some surprises?
Yeah, I mean, so I started off and I was just, I kind of decided that, because we only had 2 days, and you know, I wasn't too worried about making an absolutely perfect piece. So I sort of decided that for the first day I would just sort of experiment, and then for the second day I would kind of use those experiments and sort of put them all together. But of course, by the end of the first day, I'd made tons of experiments, had loads of fun, and then sort of had a bit of an existential crisis about like, what am I actually going to do with these things? How's it all going to come together and work? Well, yeah, it was fun, but I mean, I think, and I'm sure it's the same for many of the others, but with any kind of project, it's always a bit of a roller coaster, like there's times when you think it's all going wonderfully and you know exactly what it's going to be, and then there's times when you're like, oh no, I've made a horrific mistake.
Pretty sure there's a lot of people nodding in the audience right now, going, "Yes, know exactly how you feel."
Yeah, and I think like it's just important to sort of maintain a kind of healthy balance and keep some sort of perspective and stuff about these things, and I think that's kind of true. The whole kind of lockdown experience has been a bit like that because. At first, back in March, when sort of lockdown first happened, I was like, well, this is okay. I kind of spend my life. I'm lucky enough that I've got a sort of studio set up at home that I can work from. This isn't all that different. So there's plenty of time to like take on little projects or like experiment with some things or learn new skills and that. But then, after a while, it does sort of grind you down and you can get really like sucked into things, and so just kind of remembering to keep perspective, like take a break, go outside, that sort of thing, so I think it's kind of been a gradual process of working out like how to keep a sort of healthy balance and how to like not just get too sucked into things.
I hear you. Yeah, definitely. And actually a form of focus and a form of sort of something to focus onto, perspective with this process, you had something to respond to. And so how did you incorporate Jaylen's work into what you've produced, which we're about to watch in a moment?
Sure. So there was a couple of ways. Like I say, to start off with, I took her video and I started processing it, both the visual side and the audio side of it, really with no kind of fixed plan, just kind of messing about with it, trying some sort of new video techniques that I hadn't worked with before, and just sort of seeing what I could do with the source material, like the audio source material. So in my final piece, there is, at the end of the piece, there is a sample like an audio sample directly from Jaylen's piece, pitched down quite a bit, I think, but from her work. And then also like all the sort of visual textures and stuff, they are like, I've zoomed in on little bits of her video and kind of heavily processed them and layered them and stuff. So like, as you'll see in my piece when it plays, it's just about texture and stuff. And all the textures from that are from Jaylen's. Well, I say all, I think I actually recorded some extra autumn leaf footage because, like I say, I needed to go outside and take a walk. So,
those leaves just made me want to go and take my shoes off outside. Yeah.
Yeah. But then, I mean, I guess that was it as well. So a lot, the kind of, I don't know if it was intended, but what I got from, I got a sort of idea of the importance of going outside into nature and taking a break and taking a walk. That's the sort of theme that I got from Jaylen's piece. So I wanted to make a piece that felt like that, maybe not like just going outside, but a piece that you could watch for 5 minutes and it would feel like it's sort of taken you away as a distraction and sort of a breath of fresh air and a kind of like a wipe the slate and start fresh kind of feeling,
That sounds like a wonderful feeling, and I don't think we should wait any longer to have a look at it. So really interesting to chat to you. Thank you so much, Charlie. And without further ado, here's Charlie's response to Iteration.
Okay, so hopefully you're beginning to get a little sense now of what this project is all about. That really mesmeric piece created by Charlie in response to Jaylan's piece was then handed on to the next artist in the chain, Stephen Patterson. Stephen Patterson is a mixed media artist whose practice focuses on 2D works on paper, but also video and sound design, sometimes going by the name Heavy Pelvis. And with a dark rock and roll history behind them, Stephen spends much more time now living at one with nature, painting watercolors, as you do. Living the life of peace and harmony, putting that rock and roll history somewhere into the past. Currently, they live in a tent in an undisclosed location in the UK. And I think we managed to have Stephen with us tonight. So can we get Stephen onto the show?
Hey David, how's it going?
Stephen, nice to see you. Really well, thanks. How are you doing? You okay?
Good, yeah, you know.
Excellent. Well, look, let's talk about this project. You work with lots of different kinds of media in your life as an artist, but for this project, I believe you started actually with words and text, which wasn't really a very obvious part of the previous thing that we just saw. So why was that?
Yeah, I guess in a way, when the project was given, this idea of COVID and the creative process and mental health, one of the first things that went through my mind was a blank piece of paper. And I was just, I've always had this thing about the blank piece of paper as you start the creative process. It can be daunting. And all the stuff that came up, actually listening to some of the things that Esther and Bell Lungs and Mara were putting out. And I quite like the one Mara had where she was holding the book and the pen and just like that moment at the start of the creative process, where you're like, I just don't know where this is going to go. And then all the thoughts, all the things that I remembered about like what it was like in lockdown, all the chats with people I had about that and all the things everyone was going through, really like for the first time ever in life, like we've all experienced maybe difficult times in life, but for the first time ever, there was this like collective experience of this that seemed to go beyond, it's worldwide, of course, and I don't think anything any of us experienced in our lifetimes. And there was just so much to respond to there, like, and there's so much that had happened for me during that period. I just needed to write some of it down and get it out of my head and make it into mind maps just to clarify. Otherwise, in that creative process, I had the potential just to totally expand and go everywhere without ever doing anything, which is a common sort of thing, I feel.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that, because I think a really important part of this project, what I find really interesting about it, is the way it gives a bit of an insight into how artists are creative. Like, how does that happen? How do artists dream up work? How do we come up with our ideas? You were obviously given a very specific thing in terms of the artwork that was handed on to you by Charlie. So what did you think when you got that piece? Like, honestly, did you think?
Yeah, I mean, having known the project and this idea of the conversations and the sampling, and it was kind of like, when someone says sampling to me, I think, hip hop and stuff that I used to be into when I was a teenager and like all that.
James Brown.
The classic Aim and Break and all that. It just, and my mind just went straight to a technical thing. And that, in a way, to me, that's kind of boring, like sampling. And so the idea of sampling is conversation. So when I first heard Charlie's piece, I was like, it's, I should say mesmeric. It has like this meditative thing to it, which is quite different to where my mind was going from my memory of COVID and lockdown. Not necessarily. I think I tried to meditate. There was 3 days where I didn't sleep and I was trying my hardest to meditate and it wasn't happening. We'll maybe talk about that in a second, but so when I saw the piece, it was just like, the track was so beautiful and it was so lush. I think part of me was a little bit, I was hoping to hear maybe some of Esther's or Mara's voice in there. But responding to it, I think I responded more to the visuals and used them more in the final piece than the audio. There's little bits of audio in there that I sort of put in, but and I think what I did was I just contrasted it completely, which you'll see in the piece. So my apologies to everyone watching. for the change of vibe that's about to come.
We'll get onto that in a minute when we actually look at the piece. I mean, I really enjoyed your kind of documenting of your thought process and all of that. It seemed like you went on, because like all the other artists, you popped some posts up on our Hidden Door social media, so we could kind of, through the stories and everything, we could kind of track how you were thinking about it. And it seemed like you went on a little bit of a journey figuring out what you were going to make, starting with this blank piece of paper, as you say, coming up with words, and then, taking us through that process in a very personable and very open way. I wondered if you enjoyed the process. I mean, it seemed that you were being very open, almost sort of confessional at points.
Yeah, I mean, so like one of the things was the thinking about trying to have some communication through the Instagram, obviously with the lockdown and the Zoom thing. And a large part of the piece is me and my friend Emily talking over Zoom. And so I wanted to try and incorporate some of that. So try and create a dialogue with the Insta feed with people and try and get source. Basically, I was thinking I'm trying to get source material here for something that maybe is like, thinking about that sort of, the way we're maybe more communicating online now, as everyone said before, like not getting that being out and about with people. So yeah, it was very much trying to do that. And I also had this practice during lockdown that I was trying to do, which was just, I remember writing something in my book, like write down everything and be honest with yourself. Because actually that's maybe sometimes not even the easiest thing, like being like that, raw with yourself. And I just kind of like, the more I did that, the more I'm like, it doesn't really matter what anyone else thinks, because like I know how hard it is to even be honest with myself sometimes. So why not just be open with
I think that's it's quite interesting, because I think in times like this, we're often we're sort of expected to behave in a particular kind of a way. We're being asked to, kind of pull together and, support the NHS and all of these kind of slogans that get kind of thrown at us, and we're expected to conform to a kind of behavior, which I think when Mara was talking about how oppressive that kind of felt. And, I think when we actually are honest about how we're feeling at these times, something very different sometimes comes out. And I got a bit of an impression about of that from you in the way that you were kind of experiencing this project. And when you pulled all these kind of thoughts and ideas together into something, which we're going to see in here in a minute, but before we watch it, how would you maybe describe it? Is there any kind of key words that we could hang on it, or a kind of key mood or feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, there is maybe an intensity to it, but I think like hopefully there's some like honesty to it as well. And the conversation that forms the major part of the piece was like a 2-hour rambling conversation with my pal, which I edited down, and there's just all those little bits of the way the voice comes out in that conversation. And so I mean, watch it and see what you think. But
how do you feel about what you made?
I think that's part of the creative process. Is I've watched it back a few times now, and I'm like, oh, I would change that, I would change that, I would change that. But trying not to be like, like trying to be critical of yourself without like beating yourself up. Oh my God, it's so rubbish. But it is, I think everyone, it was actually quite liberating to have that sort of sketchbooky approach to it. And that's been really nice. Just like, I've got to make a decision. Douche, douche, douche. It's done. Okay, right, that'll do. Fine, render it. I think
that's so I was going to say, I think that's a really nice way to put it, that it feels like a sort of almost like a sketchbook kind of project, but an online version of that. So let's check it out, Stephen. Thanks.
Right. Enjoy.
Plans that we make.
So I'm meant to talk about uncertainty.
Yeah.
Uncertainty. Give me a little bit more, I guess. Or how I've felt, like what guide me, direct me.
You want me to guide you through uncertainty?
Yeah, definitely. Uncertainty is scary. I just imagine myself walking out of a door and stepping into nothing. I open the door to an abyss. Imagining nothingness is really impossible. It's like thinking about the future when I think about the past before I was born. And it's weird to think about that I didn't exist. Like, how do you remember things that happened when you didn't exist and weren't alive? It's the same as trying to think of things that could happen in the future. I have no memory of that,
I've got this
but I
thing
can
where I write down lists of
imagine.
all the different things I want to do.
I start thinking about like all of the things that I need to or want to or should
And then I
or
realize I'm just
might
trying to jump from one
possibly
thing to the other. I'm never really
need to
doing
do.
anything. You don't know what the right thing to do is.
Express what you're feeling.
Having the clarity, I suppose, of decision.
Putting the words together to speak the words. Just vocalize. Just that act can help. But it only helps if it's
Sometimes some things will come up and I'm like,
completely open and honest.
I don't even know if I can write that.
And I say exactly what's
Like,
going on.
I don't even know if my
in
brain's
brain,
allowing me
not
to
try to
admit
edit
that
it
to
at all.
myself.
Being super open. It causes me stress and anxiety to write something down on paper because my immediate thought is someone's gonna find this and read it. I'm sure I'm still holding stuff back. If I write, if I journal, if I'm making art, I am censoring. Totally tense. My body just doesn't do anything.
All I wanted to do was just block out
Just totally locks down.
everything.
Like a paralysis.
It's definitely like a psychological
Because even though like this
response
tense,
to trauma.
paralyzed
It's all about
ball
like
that I'm
getting
in
into
is
your
awful,
emotions.
it's also somehow kind of safe.
Getting into your trauma.
And then it gets to the point sometimes where,
getting into your process.
you know, I have an
It's a
emotional
wake up,
release.
uncontrollable tears and internal
I'll
all the time.
cry, or I'll get really angry, or that's not gonna happen because you're in control. That usually doesn't help. I don't know why.
Space is a container,
It's nice to have
a
space.
vessel or a container that can be
We
filled.
need confines.
Time.
We're scared of too much
and
space.
space. Instead of
And
rushing
knowing how much
to
space
fill
to allow.
that void.
Space and creativity. There is a level of separation.
They're the things we want to run from and the things we want to run to.
Focus on those deep, dark things.
You know, that sinking, empty feeling in the stomach where it's just like,
Explore them.
like your insides
Very
are being
deep, very wild
hollowed
things.
out. The fear of that wildness.
It's more primal, it's more wild.
It's scary when that primal.
It's one of those surprising,
uncontrolled
difficult to
rage comes
control
out.
emotions. And accepting those wild and scary tendencies and not be too ashamed,
Shame's like
or
maybe like a way of
too
rationalizing.
scared by my
There is a
own
wildness to those primal
feelings.
emotions.
Grief is absolutely one of those wild and dark emotions. It can be unpredictable.
Grief is primal.
No one told you you're
Guilty for not
allowed to grieve for those things.
experiencing grief in the way you'd expect to experience grief.
Whether I'm prepared for grief or not, it's still gonna suck. It's still gonna be grief.
And someone asked me recently, they're like, what do you do? What do you do to be happy?
If you'd asked me about happiness, I think I would have far less to say. Maybe I'm scared of happiness. I'm very much not in touch with my more positive emotion. The grief will feel worse somehow if you've allowed yourself to be hopeful.
And every time I felt that hope like rising, like in my body, like I knock it down.
So why not
Part of myself, like
fully
just
embrace that
cut it
happiness
and say,
in the
"Stop.
moment?
Don't feel this hope. It's dangerous. I'm fucking my own despot here, you know what I mean? There's like something about the hope that's underneath that that's actually more vital. It is that acceptance of that. And it almost seems contradictory to hopefulness because like the fact that there's death seems like that there's no point being hopeful. That feeling of hope, that is what's the thing in ourselves. Like not what I hope for, just inherently hopeful. Actually the life force itself. It doesn't need me to go and do something to fulfill it. It's just in and of itself hopeful by its nature is inherently hopeful. Just inherently hopeful because it is.
Okay, so we're getting towards the end of the chain now. Stephen made that a really quite beautiful piece of work and passed it on to Dave House, who was the originator of the entire project. So let's get Dave back on screen.
Hello.
Hi again, Dave.
Hello.
So you were the final link in the chain. How did you feel when you got this piece from Stephen? You'd obviously started the whole thing off. It'd been through various different people, and then was this the sort of thing you were expecting, or?
No. Well, Stephen's a man of many creative talents, so I wasn't sure which string from his bow that I'd be receiving. And he's been sharing a lot of beautiful paintings and drawings recently, so I wondered whether I was going to have to work out how to turn a drawing into music and sample a painting in music or something like that. So in that sense, he kind of did me a favor by giving me something audio based. But yeah, it wasn't what I was expecting. And like you were saying when you were chatting to him, I liked the rawness of it, and it struck me as really dark the first time I watched it. But having watched it subsequent times, there is a sort of, not lightness to it, but there's a sort of vein of hope, I think, which I enjoyed.
Okay, so you then responded to that and made something. Do you want to maybe explain a little bit about it, about what you made?
Yeah, so I was thinking, for me, the first thing to go for me in difficult times is my sleep. So I have real trouble sleeping, and then I get paranoid I'm not going to sleep, so I don't sleep, and that makes me more anxious, and it's like this sort of feedback loop, and there's a lot of other sort of parallels to that with sort of the way mental health can sort of spiral. So I thought I'd work quite directly with feedback loops, digital feedback loops. So I've sampled Stephen's piece pretty directly. You'll hear at the beginning it's his piece, but then what I'm doing is like feeding it through a number of chains of effects that all feed into each other and into themselves. So there's this unpredictability to the system, and each time I've played it, it's been completely different. And sometimes it ends up sounding nice, and sometimes it ends up sounding not so nice. But that's the whole point, is that you're kind of riding this wave and trying to deal with these feedback loops that you find yourself in, and try and find some way to make your peace with it, find your way out the other side, or just get lost in a black hole.
So you're about to play it for us now, but you don't know whether we're going to get the nice version or the not nice version.
Yeah. Not gonna lie,
that's amazing.
That's true.
So you're using some kit to make that happen. Do you want to maybe just I think you're going to change your camera, aren't you?
Yeah, I need to sort of direct the camera down so you can see the gear instead of my head.
Okay. Oh, nice. Flashing lights. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what these things are?
Yeah. So this one, let me see if I can move it more into the frame there. This is the main.
I'll go in a minute. So yeah.
All right. Yeah. Okay. So this is a controller. Basically, I'm going to dim the lights as well because it glows really nicely. All these pads are sort of controlling different effects. So it's kind of like, this is my interface with the computer, so I can sort of ride what's going on and try and find a balance in all these feedback loops that I'm initiating. I mean, I could get much more geeky and techie if you want, but
no, I think we should just crack on and hear the piece.
Cool. Okay.
Why no one told you for those
and do something to what you instead of who's contradicting fear of that one my body.
Prepared for
We have to be experiencing grief in the physical and uncontrollable experiencing grief.
Scared by my grief. I need we embrace that state and not be uncomfortable and not be whether I'm
seems contradictory. It's contradictory.
primal whether I focus on why no one's very wild If you'd asked by my own life.
And I always
We're scared of too much space. Until we embrace that have far less on, it's still gonna suck. It's still gonna if you've allowed yourself what's scared.
Okay, so we have actually come to the end of the journey, end of the chain. But actually, all the artists who participated in this project haven't actually spoken to each other yet about their experience and about the project that they've been a part of. So we thought it'd be quite nice just to finish this off tonight, just to get everyone back on screen and just hear from each of them about kind of how they found it, how they found the process in each other's work. So let's pile everyone onto the screen like this.
All right. So I think I'm leading this bit with all the artists together. So I thought it would be cool to sort of work back through the chain and for each person to kind of have the chance to talk to the artists whose work they responded to, which is something we haven't done yet. Stephen, Charlie touched on this earlier. He was talking about having to be mindful when you're sampling something and sort of thinking about the fact you're using other people's voices. And that definitely crossed my mind because like every single sound in there came pretty directly from your voice or your friend's voice. And I think it was kind of like obfuscated enough as it went on. But I wondered whether you'd have a response to what I did with your voice and your pal's voice and this phone call you had.
Yeah, I mean, when you put it like that,
don't sue me.
Yeah, kind of like that. Maybe the prying nature of that, especially with the phone call. And I think obviously I responded to Charlie's by using the visuals, and it was quite an abstracted thing from Bell Lung's piece that made it in. That I kind of like, yeah, my feeling of sampling that was I didn't have too much qualms about that. But then, like in the piece itself that I was doing, I'm, sampling this phone call that I had with my friend, and I did tell her before that I was going to record it for this thing, so she was aware of it. But even then, it's like, yeah, using that voice of someone in that way, but you're taking little bits out, and I think by the time it gets, obviously it's weird anytime anyone hears their own voice. I think it's a peculiar experience. So hearing your piece and then hearing the voices coming out and just sort of being crushed by other things, I think I've already got, like, for me personally with this particular piece, I already got so much distance on that. I spent whatever it was editing it, like I've already definitely got over that thing of hearing my own voice.
Yeah.
So hearing it,
a thing now.
But yeah, which is kind of weird in and of itself.
Yeah.
But
the other thing I was wondering about your work is like I said to David, I sort of picked up on this darkness in it, and is that a word you'd use for it, or?
Yeah, so definitely really interested in. I think I'm like the piece, if I was to take it on, like we'd call something like playing in the shadows or shadow play, and like I'm really kind of like, I think there's not really any hope unless we like face some of those things in ourselves and collectively. So yeah, that kind of, although there is a darkness, that doesn't kind of negate the hope that like positivity by itself can, it's always maybe a bit saccharine. And the piece, I think, is kind of Disney. It ends in a hopeful way anyway. So,
and also I loved that there was times when you had all these sort of like frequencies going up and down in the soundscape that you made. And there were moments when it was just this beautiful drone, like they sort of like converged in this like moment of like almost realization. That's what it felt like.
Yeah, I mean, that actually came from when I was sleeping, when I couldn't sleep for 3 days. Oh. And there was all these planes around. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it's something we've maybe unfortunately all experienced. But yeah, there was these planes moving around in the valley I stay in, and they were creating all these Doppler effects. I was so like kind of spaced out, and this sound just like consumed me. It felt like it was like inside my body, and that was actually the initial starting piece for the piece, was that drone sound, that intensity of something that's like threatening and maybe awesome, all encompassing, and also like kind of beautiful in places as well. Like if you just sit back and listen to it, but yeah, terrifying too.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I loved responding to your work, so thanks for being involved.
Thanks for asking me to be part of it, Dave. So Charlie, where are you? I'm trying to figure. Oh, there. Yeah. So yeah, when I got your piece, I actually had like a really nice evening one night in the studio alone. With a projector in your piece, just playing out in the speakers and just filming it against walls and water, and yeah, I really like the music, like what you created, that sense of, I don't know, yeah, the sense of space. I think you talked about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess like, yeah, I'm loving this image of you just sort of in the studio, like with it sort of surrounding you, and because it was designed to be a bit of a balm, like you say, it was kind of the opposite of your piece, like because I guess I was beginning to get a bit like during the process of making it, I was beginning to get stressed out, and I was like, no, this isn't the point. The whole reason for like making art and doing creative stuff is to like, because it's fun, because you love doing it, so it was, I was really interested to see, you taking it in a very different way, and that was interesting.
Yeah, I really wanted to have, like one of those domes you can get inside with the projectors all around me, and just just lying with my pals. I just wanted to actually,
just a nice safe space,
totally. Like, and how hard that was to maybe find sometimes, especially when you're going through mental health stuff and everything seems like it's a threat.
Yeah.
And actually having that cocoon to go to, and I loved it. So
great, I'm glad. I mean, it actually leads on quite nicely, because I was wanting to ask Jalen about when I first watched your piece, like initially I was like, where is that? Because I mean, it's in Glasgow, I recognized it and I couldn't quite place it, but then I got thinking about walks and how important just getting out the flat and going somewhere. And I was wondering to ask you if you'd found like a favorite place in Glasgow to go just to get out of the house and go for a walk,
Yeah, so that's kind of something that's interesting because I moved to quite an industrial part of Glasgow compared to where I was living in Edinburgh, where I could sort of see Arthur's Seat. And yeah, it was just interesting because I live really close to the M8 and I can hear it all the time. And during lockdown, well, obviously I was moving just around the time of lockdown, so it was quite strange because I didn't really know what the usual soundscape would be like. Like I like this kind of permaculture idea that you get a garden and you watch it for a year before you do anything in it because you want to see what already occurs. And so I felt like this process was like a little bit disjointed for me because I had no idea what does it usually sound like around here. So part of like my piece is about like that kind of tension between the sound and the silence, because that was what I really noticed. So like a lot of field recordists were out and about during lockdown, like they were going, oh my god, it's so quiet, this is amazing, we can just hear everything. So my favorite place to go is Bellahouston Park. But actually the more I'm going to it recently, the more I realize how polluted with sound, like with noise it is. And I was there like the other week, and yeah, I was sat in one place and I suddenly realized that the kind of way that the road curved round, like the two frequencies I could hear were so out of tune, it actually made me feel really sick. So I had to move to a different place where it actually was a bit more melodic or something, or it just wasn't so dissonant. So yeah, with that piece I just filmed it because I have to like cross a road to get to a park. I have to cross like the M8, or I have to cross the river to get to like a park that feels like a park, not just like some grass with lots of like concrete to get around in it. So the first day of the residency I was like, okay, I'm gonna go out, because that's one thing is I would go out to the park, and then the second day was more like in the house with my equipment. So that was kind of how that went. So yeah, Bellahouston Park is great. I really recommend it. And yeah, you can get to Pollock Park from there really easily. And I think it's just really interesting to connect to parks at the moment, because obviously there's all these protests with HS2, and for Glaswegians it really also resonates because we have this history of the Pollock Free State in Pollock Park. So there's a wonderful documentary called Birdman of Pollock, so you can see it, and it's devastating when you see these trees come down, and it's devastating because they're doing it and it's nothing's changing. So Mara, I was really interested. So obviously you covered with Hazel quite a lot. No, with Dave. Wait, was it Hazel or Dave? God, time has got David. Sorry. Yeah, you covered quite a lot, like the aspects of Esther's piece that you responded to. But what I'm really interested in is like the process of finding the stories, like because the story that you told like seemed like as old as time, itself. I really loved that about it. But then it obviously was like your response, and it really resonated because it is about that oppression of now. Like how did you sculpt it?
I mean, normally when I'm creating a story, it takes time. There's a lot of mulling over and a lot of thinking about stuff, and that's, I guess, when you're in this sort of situation as well. Sometimes if you have family who maybe don't understand the thinking process of work, then it looks like you're doing nothing, but actually you're hard at work. And so yeah, it was when I was listening to her pieces, I suppose there was a lot of different things that you're trying to grasp hold of and bring together to create a narrative. Because one of the things I loved about like everybody's work is that there wasn't necessarily a beginning and then an end. It was, whereas with storytelling there generally is, you've got quite a chronological structure to a story in order for it to make sense to people. Whereas I really love the kind of more abstract way of creating something. But yeah, it was sort of looking at my own kind of personal situation and how that is, sometimes, I guess sometimes it gets to everybody. But yeah, I think I was feeling it particularly that weekend. And that weekend actually that was my 2 days. It was the half-term break, and I've got the kids, so we were halfway on our way up to Fort William, But I really kind of, what you were saying about getting out and getting space. So we were in the Hermitage up at Dunbar and just sort of walking through the trees there, and the sound of the river and all of these things, it kind of refreshes and it resets you. And then I find I'm able to kind of think a little bit clearer. So I'll be very quick, but one of the things also that sort of inspired it was I use a lot of proverbs in my work as inspiration. And there's one where it's only the person who wears the shoe knows where it rubs. And I guess it's that thinking of how everything seems okay on the outside, but unless you're in it, you don't actually know what's going on. So no matter how amazing and wonderful life might appear on the outside, there might be something just kind of below the surface, and it's only the person who's in it who's going to be able to feel it. Yeah. I wish Esther was here so I could ask her.
Yeah, it's such a shame Esther's not here, but I'd just like to say to finish up this sequence, going backwards for everyone, thank you so much for taking part, everybody, and for bringing my crazy idea to life. It was an absolute delight working with you all. So yeah,
thanks so much for having all this.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks, Dave.
Great, thanks, David.
Great fun.
Well, folks, that's it. That was quite a long live show. It was a lot longer than we thought it was going to be. Hazel, it's you. Go on, Hazel.
Sorry, I know.
Say your thing, the thing that you were going to say.
I was going to say thanks. That's what I was going to say. A huge thanks to everybody watching, and thank you to all of the wonderful guests for sharing their work and their thoughts. Get well soon, Esther. Massive thank you to the Hidden Door team, in particular Vasilis, Dave Jarvis, Jim, Viva, Theo, Costis, and everybody else that helped make this happen. And thank you also again to Creative Scotland for making it possible.
We'll be doing these live shows every fortnight. They'll actually all be very, very different. Each live show is a culmination of the 2-week project that's set up really by a different artist and curator each time. So we're not dreaming up the stuff, they're dreaming up the stuff. And the next project starts tomorrow, so it never stops. We have our next artist curator is Florence Richardson, an insanely gifted graduate from Edinburgh College of Art from a couple of years ago. She's come up with this incredible project, which will be totally different from the one that we've just been discussing. The next one will be quite dreamy, maybe even a little bit spooky, kind of fitting in with that Halloween vibe. So tune into our social media and you'll find out all about it. And hopefully the next live show in a fortnight's time on the 10th of November will be an experience quite unlike any other. That's what we are aiming for. We have a warehouse, we have a derelict building, we have some quite interesting, we're not going to be in our living rooms anymore. We're going to be getting out and going to be making it big scale. So yeah, tune in and pop out.
We'll be beaming in, or beaming out rather, from wherever we are, and you can find us on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. Details should be in the comments here. Hopefully they've appeared for you. We'll also be uploading the shows to the website so people can watch back after the event. So tell your friends, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram.
Okay, bye.
The nights, the frights that keep me locked away in here. The streets, the sound, the ground I love is here. Oh, the lights still go, oh, fading, fading, fading from the show. Let's wrap it up.